Welcome to the Digital Culture Ideas Show. Today I interview Amy Carter, Chief Executive of the Christchurch Foundation. Amy's the kind of person who gets a kick out of helping people connect, communicate, and get things done. She's an experienced governor. She's got over 25 years of being both commercial and on not-for-profit boards. And what's more, she's actually successfully launched and grown a number of startups. She likes turning ideas into a reality that stands the test of time, and that is completely a strength of Amy's. She's a really passionate Cantabrian. You'll see that come across during the interview. She's excited about what the city and our region can offer to the world, and she is actively involved in working hard to make sure that we can all be or we can be in Christchurch City through her role at the Christchurch Foundation. In her spare time, I don't know if she has that much spare time, but she also consults through her company Perception PR. And this includes her governance roles as well as some of the project work she does, particularly focused around strategy work. In addition to Perception, her husband and Amy own shareholdings in two other consulting SMEs. So that's Brannigan's and New Zealand's Skills in Demand, and both are Christchurch based, but serving clients across New Zealand. I really enjoyed this conversation with Amy. You see through the conversation that there's these things that are really important to her. She talks about passion as being fundamental. She talks about tenacity, trying to cut through difficult situations and make things happen. She talks about stalking people that you're trying to meet and get to know. That's a really, good tip for finding out more about them, but making sure you do your research when you're actually before you approach them is one of the key tips that she has. It's such a pleasure to welcome Amy onto the show, and I know you're going to love this conversation. So Amy, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Hilary. How are you? How's the weather in Auckland, or are you here in Christchurch?
I am back in Christchurch, so no, I'm in Christchurch just like you are today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, happy to. It's exciting. I was a bit overwhelmed by the other people you're interviewing. I'm like, ooh, bit of FOMO and a bit of scared and imposter syndrome.
Oh, not at all. I only interview people I find the most inspirational, and you are definitely one of them. We met pretty recently, actually. It was through my work on the board of Regenerate Christchurch, and you had come to speak to the board around your work with the Christchurch Foundation. And I was really blown away by the work that you have done there and what you've achieved. So some of the stats, I guess, if I could please read those out. So 3.2 million funds raised. You raised that much money, but then you've actually
this financial year. I think it's 12 and a half since we've launched, which is just on 3 years. Yeah.
Oh wow. I mean, that's such huge money. And then, so the next figure that I like to look at is actually how much funds you've actually distributed as well. So that was 10.1 million. Is there an update on that one as well, Amy?
Maybe a few more 100,000 in that since we talked. So yes, it's well over 10 million now and going up, which is good because there's not much point in collecting money if you're not dishing it out.
Absolutely, and that's sort of one of your key purposes, isn't it? And then if you look at the amount of funds that you raised for victims of March 15th, the Christchurch Moss attack, so that was 11.4 million as well.
And there's still money coming into that. So I think we'll continue to be finding support for that for some time. You may appreciate the world changing due to anti-money laundering. Getting funds in from overseas isn't an easy task, and some tax locations are harder than others. So, we hope to get more in if we can navigate legally through some of those processes as well.
And that's what it's all about. So this problem that the Christchurch Foundation is trying to solve is that, in fact, there are people locally and internationally who want to give money, significant amounts of money, to Christchurch, but it's difficult for them to do so. And so you're about kind of making that easier for them. That's such a weird problem to have. We want to give you money, but it's hard. You can't receive it.
Yeah, it's
and that was the whole point.
Yeah, it was definitely a key driver for establishing the Christchurch Foundation. So the earthquakes were interesting for Christchurch because it obviously provided us a lot of insights and learnings. And one of them was that there was this desperate need for people to contribute from across the globe because people all around the world have fallen in love with our city, which because it's a beautiful place to live. And it's a city that stood up for things at times. We're women were first given the right legally to an education. We were the first city where the woman suffragist movement started. Kate Shepherd, who led that movement globally, came from Christchurch, and then New Zealand was the first country in the world to legislate that right. The nuclear-free movement globally started here in Ōtautahi, Christchurch as well. So when it matters, Christchurch stands out. The rest of the time, we're a little bit shy. And one of the things we want to do is try and encourage a bit more polite skiting, perhaps. But and when the earthquakes happened, there was people, in particular diaspora, so Kiwis living overseas and, Christchurch's home or where they went to school or university, that wanted to give, and it wasn't easy. International money transfers is hard. And it also was quite hard for corporates. How do you know where to give and that it's going to make an impact? And that's something that's increasingly we're hearing more and more from donors, is that if I'm investing my money philanthropically, will it make a difference? And who's going to tell me about that to ensure that it has? So more sophisticated approach to giving, and we're seeing that across the board, and that's a global trend. So one of the reasons we set up the Christchurch Foundation is there was a need identified after the quakes, and two, we saw that the future was changing. But we took a model that's been around for over 150 years, which is the community foundations model, which is right through North America and Europe, which is largely endowment based. So where people give us capital, which is then invested, and then we distribute the dividends from that every year to the causes that count to the donor. And we'd still do that, but we've added on, through stakeholder engagement with people here in Christchurch, a number of other services as well. So we are globally unique in what we're doing. The closest you probably get is the Tel Aviv Foundation in Israel, where we have a smorgasbord of ways to give that makes it better, more efficient, and easier for the donors, whether a corporate, a global foundation, or an individual.
And you do certainly have some big, global, very generous people that you're dealing with. Look, to kind of cut through some of the red tape on this sort of thing and get this sort of thing up and running, I mean, that takes tenacity, I think, because often there is a lot of red tape and things aren't easy. So you have this way of getting things done, is what I see. So tell me about that. Where does that come from, and how do you do that in challenging
I
situations?
don't know. My mother would have a theory on it, but it's probably not appropriate to share. I'm someone that builds things from the start. I'm not a BAU person, and I'm certainly not an operations officer. That's my idea of hell. I'm someone that really likes having a big idea and making it happen, and I really like the idea of, I'm always focused on the goal, not the journey. So if someone puts a barrier in the way, I'm quite happy to go a different way. It doesn't matter as long as I still get there. So tenacious probably is a character trait, and that's shared with my trustees, and we now have 2 other team members as well, that we're all focused on the end goal rather than the journey. So that's fun, and it's great having a bunch of people that share that passion for our city, but also happy to get there, perhaps often in a non-traditional route.
Yes, yeah. And certainly a lot of purpose behind, the organisation that you're involved with.
Definitely.
But, we have, you talked about times changing, and certainly recently times have changed quite a bit with, the pandemic and the shock downturn of, not just Christchurch, but New Zealand and in fact the whole planet. And I was wondering what your thoughts on how that might impact the work you're doing with the Christchurch Foundation.
I actually think it's a unique opportunity, for a few reasons. One, we're an isolated country at the bottom of the world that's had a sensible and pragmatic approach to handling a global pandemic. So, when I see you next, Hilary, we can have a cup of coffee together and I can give you a cuddle. That's just not happening anywhere else in the world. So that showcased us incredibly well globally. It's built upon our brand, not only as a city, but as a country. So that's interesting. pragmatism in a time of chaos globally, I think is a huge competitive advantage for New Zealand, both philanthropic and commercially. And I'd encourage anyone that has the opportunity to ensure that we drive that as hard as we can. But it also has seen people, navel gaze a bit. We're pondering what's important to us. So since COVID's occurred, when you look at trends globally, and reading from big founders like Gates and all those sorts of things, we're seeing generosity increase, but it's targeted and more often geolocated as well. So for a model like the Christchurch Foundation, which is supporting Greater Ōtautahi at Greater Christchurch, that means we're right in the sweet spot. So we have a global focus. We have sister organisations in the UK and the US that makes it tax efficient for our offshore Kiwis to give home, and we're providing them with meaningful ways to engage and make a difference. So, and we've seen that in the influx of Kiwis coming home too. So not only those that have had to, but those that are choosing to in this time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably one of your strengths in this space as well is that you've done a lot of governance work. You're a really experienced governor. So if you think of the Christchurch Foundation, even in itself, you've been brought in to set that up and make it sustainable by 2023, which is that's not long.
No.
To go from scratch to sustainable, for a start, and then also you have your own businesses as well. So one of those is Perception PR, so your entertainment marketing and PR company. So you've done this type of thing before. So I'm really interested to hear what's your lessons on that you've learned over the years around setting up these businesses, about how to make them successful, how to set up a successful business.
Tenacity, you are, and you've got to be single-mindedly focused on the end goal. I think, and a work ethic, there's no doubt about that in terms of but passion, I think, is the critical key. I struggle with beige. So people that don't have an opinions on things, or companies that don't have a position, I find that really difficult. I think I'm one of the fortunate people in the world that's been able to create the opportunity where I go to work every day actually knowing I make a difference, and it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. It doesn't feel like work, it's fun. Like I've just been having a conversation with a colleague outside, and we're getting highly animated and excited about a piece of information that we'd found out, and everyone's looking at me because I'm bonkers and bouncing around the office. But it's just good to care. And, so my career has always heavily had that focus, and even from early days. So my first directorship was on an advisory board for Surf Life Saving New Zealand at 17. So I've held governance roles since. So but I've always been purpose led. So I think it's a calling, and it's something I'm really proud that I'm able to do. Does that answer the question, or am I rambling?
Yeah. Look, can we just back up? Yeah. So when you were 17, that was your first sort of governance role on that advisory board. So if I think about the experience you're learning when you're 17, it's probably no surprise where you are now in terms of successful businesses and setting things up. You've been doing it since you've learned from way back at 17. Oh my goodness, that's just amazing. Good point to reflect on. I think that experience takes time, but
it does take time. I think it's also about having a voracious appetite to learn, and I just love people. So I spend a lot of time talking to people and asking them questions about their jobs and their businesses and what they're doing, because it genuinely interests me, and that then helps you learn so much more through that. And the other thing that I think's always helped is I've always had mentors right from when I was very young. So my first directorship at Surf New Zealand came about because the president of Surf Life Saving at that stage was a member of my surf club, a bit of grey hair and a hard case, and he sort of took me under his wing, and I've done that ever since. So, I was literally bought a beer yesterday with Gary Moore, who used to be the mayor in Christchurch, just because there's just so much knowledge in his brains, and I like to pick his brains about what we're talking about, what we're trying to do, and just to see what drops out. And there's always a gem. if you take the time to listen. And I learn more from those sessions than I did ever at university or at school. Sorry, but that's true.
Absolutely. You mentioned, your love of people, and I think that has to be true, because if I think about, successful businesses and businesses being about relationships, and look, I'm sorry, I know some of the people that you've gotten in front of, big business people, international people, and you've clearly got a way of getting in front of these people, with these key individuals. So do you have any tips to share about how you do that? Because
connections are really important. So I'm a shameless stalker. So and that probably comes from my first, I'm a failed primary school teacher, but my second career was in the charitable sector, working in development manager roles where you really wanted to do something because it was important and you needed to get up and running, but there was never enough money. So very early on in the piece, you learned how to figure out who was important and who the decision maker was, and how to be charming when you needed to be. And I think in tying it back to what's in it for them, which is not what the charitable sector always does. They think about their need rather than the need of those that are wanting to give. And so the conversation always should be led by the donor and their needs, not by the cause. And I think you'll find you'll be far more successful if that's the case. But that's true to every conversation, isn't it? I'm very conscious often so I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable at the moment talking about yourself rather than asking questions of someone else, because
I bet.
because that's how you learn more about them, so therefore you can work with them and do a better job. And when you build trust and form a relationship, you'll be amazed who's willing to open doors. But I do know and do my research on who I'm talking to, who I'm having a meeting on, who they know that I know, and that connectivity thing is really important. And that's probably that has led to a lot of success in my career as a communications person as well, was understanding that and how that works and how relationships work and understanding people. So
of course you have to understand your audience, don't you, to be able to communicate with them effectively. It's all part of that. Throughout this series as well, like, I've been really blown away by the people who've said yes to coming on the show. Like, I'm always blown away. I mean, I ask, and pretty much everyone has said yes to coming on. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And I was so, worried or concerned when I sort of started out on this that no one would want to, sit down and have a chat with me. But it's amazing how people do want to help and are happy to.
I think
but you got to ask.
Totally. And that I had some very good mentors early in my career as a business person. Sue Suckling, who's a high profile New Zealand director, has been my mentor for over 20 years. And, it was a really ballsy call to pick up the phone and say, will you chair my company, which was a tiny PR firm of 4 people in Christchurch? And she said yes. Now, that was because of relationships she's had with my business partner in the past as well. But, I remember... But you should always treat your business, no matter how small, or your organization, as though it's a global conglomerate. You should... Best practice is really important. So we always know no matter what I've done, I've always had an independent chair that, even when I own the company outright, that challenges your thinking, put some discipline around what you're doing. And in particular, when you're an entrepreneur or a sole owner of a company, it enables you to hop into the helicopter and get out of the business and focus on the business. And so having to write a board report is really a good process for clarifying your thinking and where you're going, and making you reflect back on your strategy so it gives you those disciplines. So every business we own, we've always done that. And I think it's been incredibly invaluable and helped me grow and evolve as I've went. And yes, Sue said she'd come on board until we didn't need her anymore. So she broke up with us after 3 or 4 years. And then we had other chairs, equally incredible, a lady called Donna Fife, who is an incredible leader as well. And it's interesting, it's gone full circle now. Sue's just come back and is chairing one of my husband's companies at my suggestion, because they're about to go through a big growth phase. So it's, ask people lots of questions, figure out who your heroes are, form relationships with them, and be a sponge, really.
I love that. And actually, that's a brilliant tip about, even if you're a small company, if you've got a board, or even if you pretended like you had a board, going through that process of reflecting on performance and what are you really trying to achieve, and is that aligned strategy? You're right. When you have to sit down and write things out, or it gives you the space to think about it, whereas otherwise you might just carry on with your business and how things are going. So that's a really good tip. So being the Digital Culture Ideas show, one of the things I do like to ask people is, the whole show is about that intersection between people and technology. So what's your take on digital culture? What does it mean to you?
It's an empowerment tool, without a doubt. And for me, for example, COVID's had a massive impact. So, our strategy was based on forming relationships with Kiwi expats and global philanthropists by visiting them, hosting them, having a cup of tea, or buying them a glass of wine, which is in this world reasonably difficult to do. So, we've completely pivoted to a whole digital strategy around that. And, aren't we lucky that we can do that now? Because 20 years ago, this would have been a massive problem.
No.
Yeah. Yesterday, I had a negotiation and conversation with some donors in mainland China. We had interpreters from the local consul general from New Zealand. There was 6 of us in different locations around the globe working on how can we achieve this impact here in Christchurch. So, wow, what an opportunity. So I think it's an empowerment tool. I think I need to personally learn, and others, when you turn it off.
Yes.
And that when you aren't there to be present rather than distracted by your phone or your emails and those sorts of things, it's something I'm abysmal at, and my children will tell you that quite strongly.
Same.
But on the whole, I think it's a massive opportunity, in particular for us here in New Zealand. We've got one of the best rollouts of ultra-fast broadband in the planet. We're just not really tapping into it smartly yet, I don't think. We haven't made the most of that opportunity. We are early adopters when we choose to be. FPOS was trialled here, internet banking. So when we understand there's a purpose for it, I think we do pick it up. And I don't know if we've quite joined those dots here commercially yet. But Christchurch learnt the importance of the digital world after the earthquakes.
Yes, that's right. I have
went digital very quickly.
That's right. So, and I've heard people comment on that. So, going into lockdown this time, people were just like, we've done this before, to the earthquake. So, sure.
I had a funny moment. I was hosted by Spark, who's a good friend of the Christchurch Foundation, at a dinner here in Christchurch, and Simon Mutter was sort of doing his spiel really well, as he does, and talking about what the future of issues facing small business and privately held business. And he said, you all need to be in the cloud. And we all looked at him like, we've all been there for 8 years. Because because here in Christchurch, that's quite a different message possibly to the rest of the country, because we all had to go there. We didn't have any choice.
It's very true. So I want to talk a little bit now around kind of media stuff. So when I've been thinking about digital culture ideas and doing videos and podcasts and things like that, I took quite a bit of inspiration from a media mogul called Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I had to Google him. Yes.
He's one of the things that he talks about over and over again is act like a media company. Kind of no matter who you are as an individual or a business, that at the end of the day, you're a media company probably first. So I was keen to understand, how did you get into media and PR and marketing and being in that industry? How do you see it kind of changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so my first primary school teacher very briefly, and then got headhunted by Surf New Zealand to set up and roll out initially in the Bay of Plenty a program called Beach Education, which is now the biggest outdoor education program in New Zealand, which is very cool. We learn to stay safe at the beach. So, there was never enough money to do what we needed to do. We had to get opportunities. You were looking for profile to acknowledge your sponsors and your supporters, those sorts of things too. So, the not-for-profit sector has a really great learning opportunity sitting in every role, because you tend to be lean and mean and become a jack of all trades. So I fell into PR and comms through my career in the not-for-profit sector. So working, so I started out at Surf New Zealand, went through a number of charities, and then finished up at St John, who took a punt on me as their comms manager for the South Island, and I ended up running a number of programs at St John before I went consulting. So, and that's literally 24/7. There was 2 of us, myself and Linda, in the whole of New Zealand that dealt with all media inquiries for St John. So literally your phone was ringing at 2 in the morning because something's happened, and might be the BBC or whoever. So it was a steep learning curve, but one I greatly enjoyed. And so then I left St John and actually bought into one of the oldest PR firms in New Zealand, and because there's more to PR than just media, which a lot of people don't often realise. They think it's all about schmoozing journalists. Well, probably 10% of what I do as a stakeholder engagement specialist is with the media. They are literally the last audience we ever talk to. If I've done my job properly, everyone else knows about it before the journalists do. So, so there was about 15 years consulting in that space. So, and I specialised in infrastructure and big projects and community engagement, because that's sort of where I'd come from the not-for-profit sector. So taking an idea or a concept and taking anyone from literally a seed in the ground to helping deliver it and get it up and running, and working along the project teams to do that. So dams, wind farms, port expansions, land designations. So not the sexy side of PR, a lot of talking to engineers, a lot of wearing hard hats, but and interpreting engineers, but fun, and so I learnt en route. I didn't have a traditional career, and I didn't do a degree in mass communications. So which is what you'd sort of expect now, either a journalism or a mass comms degree before we'd look at people. But life experience is really important, and I think it comes back to that people skills stuff.
Absolutely. And do you see that industry changing and evolving, and kind of how do you see that playing out, because people are doing a lot more media themselves kind of these days as well, but still need the advice and guidance as well?
Yeah, I mean, often we'd first get a client when they're in the shtuck and the TV1's on the front doorstep, and that's not the ideal situation. Ideally, if you've got someone with our skill sets on board, we would have avoided that ever happening. Yes. But we're often seen as a luxury, and then an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. I was purposely working to evolve our company away from PR, because I don't see a hugely strong future in it in the future, because the need to the ability to influence how people think about you, and exactly to the point of your that you made yourself, is that people are always on there and far more conscious of their brand me and the brand of their company, and how they constantly need to be evolving that. So so then that narrows down our influence to helping them identify who their stakeholders are and massaging their messaging. But that all started to get a bit dull for me. So other people will find that interesting. For me, it just wasn't strategic enough anymore. So our company began to evolve into other areas. Probably 10 years ago, we started working in different spaces, some more general business advice and strategy. So, but other people will love writing a media release, just not me. And it's not a particular of mine either, to be fair. I always had really good team members and colleagues that would do that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I haven't prepped you for this question, but one thing I think about a lot as an employee of an organisation, so I work for Cordia, but then I kind of have this personal brand, I guess, which I'm running with Digital Culture Ideas. And I used to think about it a lot as having two hats on. Which hat have I got on today? Am I Cordia or am I digital cultures? Digital culture. But the more I work in both of those areas, the more I realise that it's an illusion that they're two different things. One
Totally. Yeah.
reflects the other. I can't be doing something with digital cultures and not be seen as the Chief Information Security Officer of Cordia and vice versa.
Yeah.
But it's quite a new way of thinking, and I think it's one that organisations are just, I don't even know if they're thinking about it, to be honest. But so Cordia certainly did, because that's one of the reasons they hired me, because of both my personal brand and what I can do in the security space. But it's a really interesting challenge when there's some more traditional mindsets out there as well about, oh, hold on, if you're doing that, how can you be doing this over here? And you, I guess, have that similar issue as well with your different hats and different organizations that you work for. Have you thought about how that works, or have you found a way to balance it?
I think you always, in a country like New Zealand, you've always got to be very clear about what hat you're wearing, because there's so much risk for there being a conflict of interest. So you get very quick at declaring who you work for and what you're doing, and what hat you're wearing at what time. So there's no way that the two aren't interconnected, but it's interesting to consider if you're a business owner, and I've learnt this the hard way. When the business became solely about one person, then how do you transfer that? It's not an asset you can sell. So, and I think that's really interesting thing in particular for baby boomers to ponder as they look to exit, how they're going to ensure that the brand's not about them and it's actually about the services of the company. And I epically failed at that. So don't ask me for advice. I can tell you what not to do. But
could probably learn a lot from that, though.
True, totally.
You learn a lot from your failures.
I think they're completely interlinked. And if my husband's a recruiter, and and even myself, as I said before, the first thing I do if I'm going to have a meeting with someone is I stalk them online. So it is totally intrinsically linked, and I'm amused that you say that, and that was why you were hired at Cordia, because Cordia used to hire my company. We used to come in and test your systems in a crisis situation on every few years. We used to put a simulation in front of you, and big personalities in particular are quite fun to manage. So Scott Bartlett was a good one. I put him on a plane so he couldn't respond. So sorry, you're not available to respond to the
because you've got to be able to respond when the leader's not there, don't you? Yeah,
correct. So and he's so charismatic and the leader, and naturally comfortable in the dealing with media and those sorts of things. So to us, the obvious way to test Cordia was to remove him from the picture. So he didn't like it. He was very grumpy about being kept in his office.
I'd say most CEOs wouldn't like that. They'd like to be.
Sorry, you're on holiday and you're on a flight to Sydney. You can't help. Yeah, but I think that's a lesson we all need to learn, is that how do you spread the brand so that it is more than one individual, and that it's actually the culture and multiple people, and empower people to make decisions and to be a voice and a face of the company, because that is how you transition a company from not just being an individual.
Yes, something you'll have to think about when you leave the Christchurch Foundation, no doubt, Amy, because that first day we met and you presented, I was, like, as I said, blown away. And I jumped on LinkedIn, stalked you, friended you, and then I think I messaged you and said, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. Just letting you know, definitely a fan. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think you're very clever as well, so thank you. It's flattering. But I think that comes back to the whole passion thing. It's hard not for people to get excited when you're passionate. And I've just had the Court Theatre here in Christchurch and talking about their development plans, and Ross Gumbley, who's their creative director, is obviously a very theatric man anyway, but he was telling me about the project, and you could almost touch his excitement in the room as he shared that. So if anyone doesn't get excited when someone's talking with passion, then you've really got to wonder,
Yes, absolutely. So what's next for you, Amy? Or what are you thinking about this year? Or
Yeah, well, I'm not on a plane as much as I thought I was going to be.
No
I
Fiji
should
trip
have
this
been in
year.
London. No, well, I was meant to be in London at the early July, sort of launching some projects up there. And we're usually in the US in September, working with expat communities in Seattle, and we're pushing across to New York at the moment. So that's not physically happening. So there's a bit of changing. Yeah, it is. So changing the way we do things and being smarter about that. There's always March 15 was horrendous, and I've been privileged to meet a number of those that were most impacted by that situation, and we've worked hard to support them in the best way that we can with their leadership, rather than us saying this is how you do it. But because the city responded to that so well, it provided us with such a unique opportunity to not only support that community, but the other communities within Ōtautahi as well. And that's what's keeping me excited at the moment, is using that platform and New Zealand's platform as being who we are, and leveraging that to get even better outcomes for our communities here. So that's pretty exciting, and we've got some really big plans. I can't share them yet, but the exposure of March 15 in terms of what's happened and how we've responded has given us this incredible database of opportunity, people that have already built a relationship with the Christchurch Foundation. So now we've got to grow that relationship and come up with ideas and opportunities for them that are big enough for their appetites, because it's not a sausage sizzle kind of world.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think Christchurch has a really, really bold, future coming, and I think it is a really exciting city to live in. Hence why I came back here after travelling. There was sort of no doubt it was going to always be Christchurch. Such a Christchurch person through and through, absolutely. So if people want to find out more about you, Amy, or how they best to contact you or to learn more about the work that you do.
So LinkedIn's kind of my work platform, so you can certainly find me there, though I do have a personal policy of only linking with someone I've met them. So, but always happy to have a cup of tea, because so many people have been good to me in my career and giving me time to have a conversation. I'm really happy to do the same. And also the Christchurch Foundation's website, christchurchfoundation.org.nz, will tell you a little bit more about the programs, and our social media platforms also will keep you up to date with things as they evolve.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it is a good website. It's got some good videos and information around, just what this foundation does, which is so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Amy. It's been so wonderful to speak to you and, find out about sort of your career and how you got into things, and then all this amazing work you're doing. So keep it up, as I know you will. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been awesome.
My utter pleasure, and best of luck. Thanks, Hilary. See you.